Hey Critical Analysis, this is your video for your Chapter 6 vocabulary. So we are in week 5. We are now officially halfway over. So we are going to be talking about now Chapter 6. So this is going to start us on the second half of our vocabulary for the semester. So I have my Chapter 6 text up and running here in the background. As always, in the the week 5 folder, chapter 6. If you want to go to the fill-in section, you have your chapter 6 vocabulary guide. I will have a separate video for the chapter 1 through 5 study guide. You do have an assignment with this coming week, so that'll be a separate video. This is just for chapter 6 vocabulary. And like I've done before, I'm going to have my version up and running, so it's already filled in, so I could just talk to you about these words. So the words for chapter 6, all 3 selections are being used for this chapter. That is true for vocabulary as well as your text and skill sheet. So again, depending on which order you're watching these videos, if you've already watched the chapter 6 assignment video, I would have talked about these selections in that video because you are filling out questions and responding to questions based on those selections. If you didn't watch that video yet, you are going to see these selections for the first time in here because all 3 selections are used in our vocabulary as well as our text and skill sheet. All right, so we're going to start with the word inopportune all the way down to engendering, and these are coming from reading number 1 in your text. So you can go to communications. This is a selection on like anger management, managing conflict, different kind of strategies to help personal and interpersonal communication in lots of different settings. So it is, I think, a decent read. Again, not terribly long. A lot of our first readings aren't super long. So the first set of words are coming from this selection that we'll go through that you will see in context, or you may have already seen in context, depending again when you're watching these videos. All right, so let's go ahead and look. Inopportune means unexpected or inconvenient. So not to kind of downplay COVID, because COVID was very serious for many people, but there were some situations for COVID that there were probably like inopportune things, right? So if you were healthy, but you may have been exposed, a quarantine might have been like inopportune, right? So it was probably inconvenient. We deal with this kind of stuff like on a day-to-day basis, right? Things happen, they're unexpected, it's not convenient, it's inopportune, it's not the right timing. Legitimate, to be justified. So if you're trying to like, hey, I have a legitimate reason why I am late. I'm justified in this. You know, there's a car accident. My child was sick. You know, whenever you try to like say, hey, this is a real reason, you know, this is legitimizing, this is justified. Retaliate is just another word for revenge. So if you seek retaliation on someone, you are trying to seek revenge. It's not a positive thing. So retaliate means revenge. If you have siblings or, you know, cousins close in age, this is probably something you might be familiar with. Or if you have children with siblings. Aggravated means something that is irritable, angry, bad. Aggravate means you're kind of trying to get on someone's nerves, or someone is getting on your nerves. Again, see what I talked about here. Siblings, cousins, family members, like they can irritate you, right? Aggravate. Validate is going to recognize or acknowledge, like I validate your feelings. I recognize those feelings. Validate can also show like how something is correct, like this is valid, this is accurate, this is correct. And then engendering means to give rise to. It's kind of like the start of something. So if something is engendered, it means like, hey, it's starting, it's going to happen, it's rising up. All right, so those are the words from your very first selection in chapter 6. Now we're going to talk about omens, and it's going to go to substance right here. So kind of flip through there. This is coming from selection number 2, so I'll click on that. This is from a history selection that deals with North Americans before Columbus. So oftentimes when I do this with my face-to-face classes back in the spring, this selection kind of gave a lot of, there's a couple selections actually like this. For whatever reason, they focus on Columbus, a couple different readings in our text. Some background that a lot of people aren't familiar with Christopher Columbus. It's a little eye-opening. So this is a little bit of a longer reading, especially if you're not a big fan of history, but it is very informative reading. So something to kind of think about as you go through. Again, you'll have to read this for your text and skill sheet regardless, because you do have to answer a short answer question for that assignment. So just keep that in mind. All right, so let's talk about the words that come from this reading. Omens, these are signs or warnings. If there is an omen, it's like kind of like, hey, something bad's about to happen. This is an omen, it's a sign. So sometimes you might hear people say like, oh, you know, X, Y, and Z happened. That's an omen that this is about to occur. You know, so a warning sign. Maize is just like a plant-based corn. That came out wrong. Corn is a plant, so it's a type of corn. So maize, kind of synonymous sometimes with corn. Precarious, this is a not good situation. It's not safe, it's not steady, it's not strong. If you put yourself in a precarious situation, it might be a little dangerous even. It's not a steady situation. Conquest is land or people won or taken. So in the history selection, they'll talk about how some of these different groups would fight, and then they would try to, you know, they won the conquest. They won people, or they won land. So it's people or land that has been won or taken. Outstripped means to overtake or get ahead of. In the selection, they talk about the outstripping of like the needs for the population. Like the population was growing so quickly that it was outstripping the food supply. So it's almost like it's getting ahead of it. It's not a good thing when something is outstripped. It means it's not lasting. Something else is getting ahead of it. Subject means under authority. If you have, if you are subjected to something, if you are a subject, you are under the authority of a figure or a community or whatever that might look like. Subsistence is the minimum needed to support life, like very basics to support life. Your subsistence, what is going to help you survive. Again, just the minimum. All right, and then the last set of words from benign down to antidote are gonna come from selection number 3. And selection number 3 is a business reading. Talks about consumer behavior. So we'll click here. So if anyone likes to do a lot of shopping, in person, online, this one kind of focuses mostly on online shopping, but talks about the dark side of consumer behavior. So I found this one to be pretty interesting and it's a little bit longer, but I think it was like a quick read because it was kind of relatable. All right, so that's where these words are coming from. All right, so we have benign, not harmful. Like if you go to the doctor and they say you have a benign something or other, that's good news. It's mild, it's not going to be harmful. Surveillance is something that is being watched or watching. So if you're under surveillance, you're being watched, and they're talking about like, you know, maybe a video camera in a store, like surveillance. Maybe an officer is staking out, they're surveilling someone. It means to be watching. Onerous means harmful or burdensome. So it's kind of like when there is a difficulty or a burden placed on someone else. It's kind of, I don't want to say the opposite of benign, but it does mean to have or bring harm or to be a burden. Maybe this is like a really small example of that. You know, like maybe your friend asks you to take them to the airport. It's like a 3 a.m. flight or something in Cleveland, and it's like an hour away. You know, that might be a little onerous. You know, it's a kind of a burden something for you. Surreal means this is very strange. This is unusual. Like this is a surreal experience. Like how is this happening? It doesn't quite feel real. Fixation is when you have an unhealthy like attachment or obsession with something. Maybe you're fixated on a certain hobby or person or activity, whatever that might be. And sometimes that kind of borders into unhealthy. Anthrax, if any of you remember this is like, whew, some of you weren't even alive. With the early 2000s, I think it was the latest anthrax scare when people were worried about this. It's a bacteria and it's an infectious disease, like a little powder that can cause a lot of harm. And then kind of going with that, like an antidote, something that relieves, like an antidote to a headache, for instance, might be Tylenol. An antidote to stress might be yoga, you know, something that relieves or gives a remedy too. All right, those are your chapter 6 vocabulary words. In the chapter 6 assignment video, I'll talk to you about the chapter 6 quiz. So as usual, feel free to do what works best for you. If you turn these into flashcards, if you fill out your own study guide, if you just use my video, and then hopefully I'll see you back for another video in the future. Bye.